The rain poured against the window of their rundown apartment, streaks of water racing each other down the glass like silent reminders of everything falling apart. Inside, the air was heavy, stale coffee, unpaid bills scattered across the kitchen counter, and silence so loud it felt suffocating. Samuel Carter sat slumped in a worn-out recliner, staring at the muted television. The flickering light reflected in his tired eyes, but his mind wasn't on the screen. It was on the life he once had, the job, the respect, the love of a wife who now looked at him with more disappointment than affection. Before we go deeper into Samuel and Clara's story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Because what you're about to hear proves that sometimes, the person who walks away is the one who regrets it most. It all started the day Samuel lost his job at the steel plant. One minute he was clocking in, greeting his crew with a grin, and the next he was standing in the manager's office, listening to words that shattered his pride. "We're shutting down, Sam. I'm sorry." Those words echoed in his ears long after he cleared out his locker. 20 years of sweat and loyalty, gone in a single morning. At first, he told himself it was temporary. He'd bounce back. America was the land of opportunities, wasn't it? He filled out job applications online, stood in line at job fairs, even walked into warehouses asking for work. But every door slammed shut. His resume was too narrow, his age suddenly an obstacle. Weeks turned into months, and with every rejection email, the strong, confident man Clara had married faded into someone else, someone tired, beaten down, almost unrecognizable. Clara tried to be patient in the beginning. She picked up extra hours at the boutique where she worked, selling handbags and shoes to women who didn't think twice about swiping their credit cards. She'd come home with tired feet but a forced smile, cooking whatever she could throw together from Walmart's bargain aisle. At night, she reminded Samuel, "We'll get through this. You'll find something." But words of encouragement only stretch so far when the rent is late, when the landlord slips yet another eviction warning under the door, when the fridge holds nothing but milk past its date and half a jar of peanut butter. One evening, Samuel walked in carrying a brown paper bag with pride written all over his face. "Clara, I got us dinner," he said, pulling out a rotisserie chicken and a small pack of mashed potatoes. Her face didn't light up the way he hoped. Instead, she looked at the receipt in his hand. "Sam, this was $14. 14. We're behind on rent, the car payment is due, and you're bringing home takeout chicken." The smile fell from his face. "I just wanted to do something nice. For us." "Nice doesn't pay bills," she snapped, her voice echoing through the tiny kitchen. Their fights became routine. Sometimes it was about money, other times about Samuel's endless hours staring at job listings that never turned into interviews. Clara began to feel like she was carrying the weight of their marriage alone, and bitterness settled into her heart like a permanent guest. The breaking point came one late night in January. Snow covered the streets outside, and inside, the apartment was freezing because the heating bill hadn't been paid. Clara sat at the table wrapped in a blanket, scrolling on her phone, while Samuel sat across from her, trying to explain how his last interview had gone. "They said they'll call back," he said, rubbing his hands together for warmth. Clara let out a hollow laugh. "You've been saying that for months, Sam. Do you even hear yourself anymore?" His jaw tightened. "What do you want me to do?" "I'm trying, Clara. God knows I'm trying." She slammed her phone on the table. "Trying isn't enough. I didn't sign up for this. I didn't marry you to live like some broke college kid eating ramen noodles every night. Look at us. Look at me. I'm tired, Sam. I'm tired of struggling." Her words cut deeper than she realized. Samuel lowered his gaze, staring at the cracks on the table instead of the woman across from him. For the first time, he wondered if love really could survive hardship. Unbeknownst to him, Clara had already found an escape. Richard Hamilton, one of her wealthiest customers at the boutique, had been chasing her for months. He was older, sophisticated, and, most importantly, loaded. When Clara rang up his purchases, he always lingered with a smile, slipping in compliments about her beauty, her intelligence, her potential. At first, she brushed him off. She was married, after all. But the more empty her wallet became, the louder Richard's promises sounded. One night, after Samuel had fallen asleep on the couch, Clara sat in their dim bedroom staring at a message from Richard: "You deserve better than this. Let me take care of you." Her thumb hovered over the reply button. Tears stung her eyes, but she couldn't ignore the gnawing ache of wanting more security, more luxury, more life than this suffocating apartment offered. The next morning, she didn't bother cooking breakfast. She packed a small overnight bag, her movements quick and deliberate. Samuel watched her from the couch, his heart pounding as reality hit him like a punch in the gut. "Clara, where are you going?" his voice cracked. She didn't meet his eyes. "Somewhere I can breathe." "What about us? About everything we've been through?" She zipped the bag shut. "I can't survive on memories, Sam. I need more than promises of a better tomorrow." Those were the last words she spoke before walking out the door, leaving Samuel sitting in the half-dark apartment surrounded by unpaid bills and silence so deep it made his chest ache. The divorce papers came a few weeks later. He signed them with trembling hands, his eyes burning but dry. There were no tears left. Just a hollow ache where his heart used to be. For months, Samuel drifted through life like a ghost. He stopped shaving, stopped answering calls from friends, stopped opening the blinds. Depression wrapped around him like a heavy winter coat he couldn't take off. At night, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every fight, every harsh word, every look of disappointment on Clara's face. Meanwhile, Clara's new life glittered on the surface. Richard showered her with gifts, diamonds, designer handbags, dinners in New York City's finest restaurants. Her Instagram feed bloomed with pictures of champagne glasses and Caribbean vacations. To the world, she looked like a woman who had made the right choice. But Samuel didn't see those pictures. He didn't need to. His pain was raw enough without knowing what she was doing. His world was small now, just the four walls of his apartment, the echo of her voice, and the endless question running through his mind: why wasn't I enough? What Samuel didn't know was that this wasn't the end of his story. Life had a way of breaking a man down only to rebuild him stronger. And while Clara thought she had won, she was about to discover that money can't buy happiness, and love can't be replaced with diamonds. Samuel's journey was only just beginning. The first morning Clara woke up in Richard Hamilton's Long Island mansion, she felt like she'd stepped into the glossy pages of a magazine. The floor-to-ceiling windows washed the bedroom in pale gold, the duvet felt like a cloud, the air smelled faintly of jasmine from the diffuser the housekeeper set each night on the marble nightstand. When she slid her feet into the velvet slippers laid out by the bed, she smiled, half believing she'd earned this, half worried she'd only borrowed a life that didn't belong to her. Downstairs, breakfast wasn't just breakfast. It was a tableau, thick-cut bacon arranged beside a nest of truffle scrambled eggs, berries shining in a crystal bowl, orange juice freshly squeezed into tall flutes. A chef in a white coat waited with a polite distance, and a housekeeper quietly folded a linen napkin over Clara's lap with the same reverence as a hotel concierge. Clara took a sip of coffee and pretended her hands weren't trembling. "Sleep well?" Richard asked, strolling in with that easy billionaire gait, tailored shirt open at the collar, cufflinks flashing in the morning light. He kissed her forehead like a man who loved the idea of being in love. "I did," she lied, smiling. "Everything's beautiful." "Good." He snapped his fingers lightly, and the chef stepped forward to describe the day's options. Richard liked options. He collected them: cars, wines, watches, and now, Clara. By noon they were in the city for a fitting at a midtown atelier. A sales associate fluttered around Clara, pulling silk gowns in jewel tones that made her skin glow. In the mirror she looked like a woman she might have followed on Instagram, a woman with perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect luck. She swallowed the thought that luck always sends a bill. The gala that night draped the Metropolitan Ballroom in silver and light. A string quartet played near the Champagne Tower. People recognized Richard, they always did. Money has a face in New York. Hers was still learning to smile beside it. Richard introduced her as my wife, and Clara watched lips curve into practiced congratulations. She took pictures in the mirrored lobby, tagged the venue, posted, "Honored to be here Sparkles," and within minutes the likes spilled in, "You made it, girl. Soft life queen. Heaven looks like this." She turned her face just enough that the camera couldn't see the small quake in her jaw. Later, in the back of the limo, she laughed at a joke the driver made about midtown traffic. It wasn't flirting. It wasn't anything. But when the rear door thunked shut at the mansion and the butler disappeared, the smile slipped from Richard's mouth like a dropped coin. "You enjoyed that," he said, the words flat. "Enjoyed what?" "The driver." His hand circled her wrist, not hard, not gentle. "Try not to look impressed by men who work for me. It's unseemly." Clara blinked twice. "He made a joke about a taxi. That's all. Don't make a fool of me in my car." He released her and strode inside like a man dismissing a staff meeting. The first bruise lived just beneath the thin bracelet she wore the next few days. It faded. The correction didn't. Meanwhile, in Queens, Samuel Carter's apartment carried the quiet of a place that had forgotten what laughter sounded like. Morning used to pull him up before sunrise, now noon arrived and found him still staring at the ceiling. The radiator clanged like a tired drum. A pile of unopened mail sat on the counter, electric, gas, a credit card warning stamped in red. He told himself he'd open them after coffee. He told himself that yesterday. He shaved in fits, half a beard one day, the other half 3 days later. He counted coins at the corner bodega under the fluorescent hum, cheeks warming when the clerk said, "Short by 60 cents, man." He set the pasta back on the shelf and bought bread instead. The clerk tried to offer a nod of sympathy, the kind New Yorkers give each other without asking questions. Samuel looked at his shoes. Mark knocked twice that week with a six-pack and a stubborn loyalty. "Let's watch a game. Yell at a ref or something. It's medicinal." Samuel cracked a can and let it go warm in his hand. "What's the point, Mark?" "The point is you're still here. Feels like I shouldn't be." Mark shifted, eyes cutting to the photograph on the bookshelf, Samuel and Clara on their wedding day, her hand on his chest, sunlight in her hair. She walked when the water got rough. "That's not on you." Samuel stared at the can. "Maybe I was the anchor." Mark didn't know what to say to that, so he said he'd call tomorrow. Tomorrow stretched, thin as a thread, until it snapped. Clara learned the choreography quickly. Smile for photos. Laugh at safe volume. Don't check your phone at the table. Compliment the host's art. When Richard spoke, look at him, not away, not down. If he placed his hand at the small of her back, it meant stand closer. If he looped his finger around her champagne glass, it meant that's enough. Affection disguised as instruction, control dressed as courtesy. He gave her a card with no limit but an unwritten ledger of expectations. Her closet filled, Chanel jackets like sugared mints, Italian heels that clicked like punctuation across marble. She lined them up, color by color, then shut the door and sat on the edge of the tub, head in her hands until the bathwater ran cold. On Tuesdays, she lunched with women who seasoned their salads with gossip. "You're lucky," one said, tapping the rim of her glass. "Richard is precise. He likes things just so." She smiled the way people smile at thunder from far away. On Thursdays, the trainer came. "Breathe through it," he said, adjusting her posture. She breathed through everything. On Sundays, Richard's mother visited. She wore pearls that seemed bred into her skin. "We're proud people," she told Clara once, in the powder room where voices echo soft. "Hamilton men make demands. Hamilton wives rise to them." She smoothed Clara's shoulder like she was flattening a wrinkle from the family name. "Of course," Clara murmured, and later cried quiet tears in the shower, letting the water swallow the sound. The worst nights came wrapped in a fine Scotch glow. Richard would come home late, loosen tie, jaw hard. If dinner wasn't hot, his voice cooled the room. If the roast was overdone, he smiled with all his teeth. "You had one task today." If she spoke up, he poured silence and made her drink it. Once, he swept her phone off the counter with the back of his hand. It hit the tile in 2 clean pieces. "You're not a teenage girl," he said. "Look up when I talk to you." Her hands shook as she gathered the fragments. The butler swept the rest. No one met her eyes. That night, in bed, Richard reached for her with a careful violence, as if hungry for proof that she belonged to him. She stared at the crown molding and left her body, a quiet evacuation. When it was over, she turned toward the window, counted slowly to 100, and came back. Morning would bring a bouquet. It always did. She started to hate lilies. Samuel found himself on the Queensborough Bridge in February. The river below looked like a promise made of black glass. He leaned over the railing, wind tearing at his worn jacket, and considered how simple it would be, 1 choice, 1 second, 1 silence forever. But the mind plays movies you didn't mean to rent. Clara, 5 years ago, looping his tie before an interview. "You're handsome when you're nervous," she'd teased, kissing his chin. Her laugh had sounded like a small bell. "You're stronger than you think, Sam." The line hurt now, hooked behind his ribs, but it also tethered him to the rail. He stepped back, gripping the cold iron until his knuckles cooled. He cried, the ugly, body-shaking kind that leaves you empty and oddly clean. Then he walked home, 1 block at a time, past a bakery that had closed, past a barber who waved anyway, past a woman tugging a toddler through a slush puddle while smiling like it was summer. The next day he opened the drawer with the bills. He stacked them. He called the electric company and asked for a payment plan. The woman on the line said, "I'm glad you called." He didn't know why that sentence felt like a blanket. He shaved. He changed his sheets. He took the wedding photo off the shelf and, after 3 tries, set it face down in the closet, not in the trash. He wasn't ready for trash. He might never be. Clara posted less. When she did, she posted wider, flowers, sunsets, cappuccinos. Not bruises. Not apologies. Her DMs filled with envy-s shorthand, "Adopt me, sis. Manifesting this life. How did you do it?" Once, she typed, "I traded my oxygen." She deleted it before sending and posted a photo of a croissant instead. She tried to talk to Richard one afternoon, choosing her words like glass figurines. "I think I'd like to take a class," she said. "Photography. Or interior design. Something to fill my days." "Your days are full," Richard said without looking up from his tablet. "We have the museum dinner Friday, the Southampton weekend after, and my mother's birthday on Tuesday. Don't crowd our calendar with hobbies." It wouldn't crowd. He flicked his gaze up then, and she shut the rest of the sentence in her teeth. He returned to his screen. Her mouth tasted like pennies. That night she dreamed she was running down a hallway that grew longer with every step. When she woke, she could hear the ocean through the cracked window, though the house was miles from the shore. The sound was in her head. The waves said go. Samuel went to a food pantry on a gray Wednesday and stood in a line that moved like forgiveness, slow but steady. A volunteer with kind eyebrows handed him a bag heavy with potatoes, onions, a dozen eggs. "You cooking for yourself?" she asked. "Trying," he said, and when she smiled, it didn't feel like pity. It felt like a hand on a shoulder, the kind that says I've been cold too. On the walk home he saw a flyer taped to a lamppost, community job fair, Saturday, free resume help. He tore the bottom strip with the address and tucked it into his wallet behind a Metro card that still worked. He slept better that week. Not well. Better. At the job fair, the gym smelled like floor polish and the nervous damp of hope. Tables lined the space, security companies, warehouses, a temp agency, a catering service willing to train. Samuel sat with a woman who rewrote his resume in 20 minutes flat, trimming the fat, tightening the verbs, turning worked at the plant into led a team of 12 with 0 safety incidents across 5 years. He stared at the page, at his own life made credible again. Don't undersell yourself, she said, handing him the printout. He left with a stack of business cards and a headache. Nothing promised. Something possible. On the subway platform he stood behind the yellow line and watched a mother braid her daughter's hair while waiting for the train. The little girl swung her feet and told a story that didn't have an ending. The mother nodded like all endings are negotiable. Samuel didn't cry then. He saved it for the apartment, where the radiator finally warmed and the kettle whistled like an old friend. At a charity auction upstate, Richard bid the price of a car on a painting because another man wanted it. Clara clapped. On the way home he described the thrill of acquisition like a hunter after clean sport. When they reached the driveway, he took a phone call and waved her inside without looking. She stood in the foyer alone, fingers around her purse strap, and watched dust sparkle in the angled light. The house could fit 5 of her old apartments. But she couldn't find a corner that felt like hers. She went upstairs and opened a jewelry drawer. Diamonds blinked up like obedient stars. On impulse, she closed it and opened the next, scarves, a rainbow of silk. The next, notes from Richard's assistant about upcoming events, pages clipped with gold. The next, empty. She put her hand in the emptiness and left it there for a full minute, palm against polished wood, as if she might feel a pulse. Downstairs, a small argument bloomed from nothing, a centerpiece he didn't like, a caterer she'd approved. His voice stayed smooth but cold. You're losing your touch, Clara. I never had it, she said, surprising them both. Silence swelled. Then he smiled without warmth. Stay in your lane. Later, when the house slept, she slipped into the guest room and pressed her forehead to the glass. The lawn lights made neat circles on the grass. Neat. Controlled. Bordered. She whispered help to her reflection once. It didn't answer. Samuel was at a diner on Northern Boulevard on a Thursday afternoon because the coffee was free refills and the waitress called everyone Han. The place smelled like buttered toast and old stories. He unfolded the free paper from a rack by the door more out of habit than hope. A quarter-page ad, black text on white, experienced driver wanted, private residence, competitive pay, discretion required, background check, send resume to. He read it twice, stomach tightening. The address box listed a Manhattan management office he didn't recognize. He took out his phone and snapped a photo like he might lose the words if he blinked. Good news? The waitress asked, topping his cup. Maybe, he said, and realized he meant it. He walked straight to the library because his printer hadn't worked in months. He logged into a computer, opened the resume the woman at the job fair had made, and added a line about safe driving, no accidents, commercial vehicles at the plant. He printed 2 copies and slid them into a manila envelope from the reference desk. The librarian gave him a stamp like she was arming a knight. At the counter, a bulletin board sagged with neighborhood notices, tutors, piano lessons, a missing cat named Waffles. He pinned nothing. He left with the envelope tucked under his arm like a small, breakable future. Back home he polished his shoes until he could see his face in them. He ironed a shirt he hadn't worn since the plant shut down. He rehearsed answers aloud in his kitchen, yes, ma'am. No, sir. I value discretion. He practiced not sounding desperate. He failed, then tried again. He mailed the envelope that evening. As it slid through the blue mailbox slot, he felt something shift inside, a tooth clicking into place, a door unjamming. The night air was cold and clean. He could smell someone's dinner 2 floors up, garlic, onions, hope. He didn't know who would read that resume. He didn't know they reported to a woman who had built a global logistics empire from a single trucking route her father started in Atlanta, an heiress who wore power like a second skin and kindness like a secret. He didn't know her laugh would feel like a son he'd forgotten existed. He didn't know any of it. He only knew he'd finally moved. He slept that night with the window cracked, the city rumbling like distant surf. He dreamed of driving a car with leather seats that didn't squeak, along a coastline he couldn't name, toward a voice he hadn't heard yet but would recognize when it called his name. Clara sat at a charity brunch across from a woman who collected rare orchids and husbands. The woman admired Clara's bracelet. "Hamilton has good taste," she said, turning her wrist to make the gems catch light. "So I've been told," Clara answered. "You'll learn to love it," the woman said, meaning the life. "Or you'll learn to leave it. We all do one." She popped a strawberry into her mouth and changed the subject. Clara felt the sentence settle in her bones like a folded note she'd find weeks later in a coat pocket: "You can leave." That night, when Richard told a story about a man he'd ruined for sport, she laughed on cue. Inside, a part of her stepped back and observed the scene like a stranger peering through glass. She imagined telling the truth. She imagined running. She imagined opening a door and finding, what? A world that didn't clap when money entered the room. A hand that reached for her without taking. A quiet that didn't punish. She went to the guest bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the closed toilet lid. Her heartbeat filled her ears. She whispered, "Help," again, this time to no one, and then washed her face until her skin cooled. When she came out, the lilies on the foyer table were fresh again. Of course they were. 3 days after he mailed the envelope, Samuel's phone rang from an unknown number while he was sweeping the kitchen. He almost let it go to voicemail, then grabbed it like a man snatching a life preserver. "Hello. Mr. Carter. This is Evelyn from Vance Placement. We received your application for the private driver position. Are you available for a preliminary interview tomorrow at 11 a.m. in Midtown?" He looked at the clock, the broom, the mottled light on his floorboards. "Yes. I'll be there. Please bring your license, references, and be prepared for a background check. Dress is business casual." "Thank you," he said, and after he hung up, he leaned his forehead against the cool refrigerator door and exhaled a sound that was almost a laugh, almost a prayer. He texted Mark. "Got a shot at a driver gig tomorrow." Mark replied with 3 fist bumps and knew you weren't done. That night, Samuel laid out his clothes like a ritual. Shirt, slacks, belt, shoes mirror bright. He printed directions in case his phone died. He set 2 alarms and asked the clock to be kind. Across the river, Clara lay awake beside a man who slept like a king. She traced a crack in the ceiling with her eyes and thought about the sentence from brunch: "Learn to love it or learn to leave it." The ocean roared in her head again. The waves said soon. And somewhere between those 2 apartments, in the circuitry of a city that breaks and remakes people daily, a thin line drew itself between a man who had almost let go and a woman who didn't know yet what she would catch, 2 stories bending toward each other, neither aware of the shape their collision would make. Samuel closed his eyes knowing only that he had somewhere to be in the morning. Clara closed hers knowing only that she could not stay forever. The city breathed. The night held. Dawn, patient and inevitable, waited just beyond the blinds. And in that thin, trembling space between what hurts and what heals, everything was about to change. Samuel woke before the alarm, not because of fear this time, but because some quiet animal inside him had remembered how to hope. Steam curled off the bathroom mirror as he shaved carefully, taking back the face he used to recognize. He ironed a white shirt until the fabric shone, buffed his shoes to a mirror gleam, slid a crisp resume and 2 references into a plain folder, and stood for a long breath in the doorway of his apartment. "Come on, Sam," he whispered. "You've got this." Outside, Queens was still rubbing the sleep from its eyes. A bakery 2 blocks over smelled like warm sugar, a bus sighed at the corner. On the E train he kept one hand on the folder and one around the cool pole, watching stations tick by like mile markers on a road he hadn't thought he'd travel again. Midtown came at him in glass and angles. The placement agency's lobby was all lacquered wood and quiet money. "Mr. Carter," a receptionist called, and a woman in a slate-gray dress, Evelyn, guided him through a door that whispered shut behind them. They sat across a conference table that looked like it could seat a jury. Evelyn asked questions in a voice that managed to be both brisk and kind. "Tell me about driving heavy vehicles. Box trucks, flatbeds, pickups with loaded trailers." 10 years. No accidents. He kept his gaze steady. "Safety officer on my crew the last 5. Availability? Whenever needed. Early mornings, late nights, overnights if the job requires. No hesitation. Temperament?" She tilted her head. "We place drivers with high-profile principles. Calm under pressure matters more than horsepower." Samuel thought of the bridge, the river like black glass, the way he'd stepped back. "I don't rattle easy," he said, and was surprised by how true it sounded in the room. She made notes, then closed the folder. "Background check. If it's clean, second round with the client. Ms. Ariel King." The name chimed against the inside of his skull. Articles he'd skimmed in waiting rooms, a cover story once at the bodega, King Lines, the daughter who doubled the empire. Trucks and ships and warehouses stitched up the eastern seaboard with her signature tucked between the lanes. Samuel stepped back onto the midtown sidewalk with the feeling of having leaned in toward a door and heard footsteps coming from the other side. The call for the second interview came 3 days later, 10 a.m., Hampton's residence. A black SUV met him at the Montauk station, smell of leather and new money filling the cabin. The driver, wordless and professional, turned up a long drive where sea grass bowed to the wind and a glass and stone house looked out over the Atlantic like it had opinions about the horizon. Inside, the foyer breathed cool air and light. A staircase curved like the inside of a shell. Samuel stood with his folder and his clean shoes and tried not to look like a man who'd grown up measuring rooms by the number of steps from couch to kitchen. She appeared on the landing without fanfare, no entourage, no announcement, just a presence that shifted the room's center of gravity. Ariel King wore a cream suit and the kind of stillness that suggested any noise she made was by choice. Warm brown skin, soft waves of hair framing an oval face, eyes that seemed to skim for truth rather than surface. "Mr. Carter." Her voice was low, velvet over steel. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for having me, ma'am. Let's drive." She moved past him toward the circular motor court, the sea wind catching a whisper of scent, vanilla layered with cedar. A fleet waited in the sun, a phantom like a private planet, a Model X with gull-wing doors half open, 2 black Escalades, a Bentley Mulsanne so polished it seemed wet. She stopped at the Bentley and handed him the fob. "Take us down Ocean Road," she said, and slid into the rear seat. Samuel sat behind the wheel like a man kneeling at an altar. He adjusted the mirrors, found the pedals with the ball of his foot, let the 12 cylinders wake with a polite purr. He eased them onto the lane, blinkers on even when no one watched, the manners of a driver who believes rules are scaffolding, not suggestions. They passed hedges that hid other fortresses, the ocean shouldering blue to their left. He kept his hands at 9 and 3, eyes high, scanning far ahead, the way safety officers teach you when they want you to live long. "Why this job?" Ariel asked from the back, reflection small in his rear view, those eyes on him, reading. The false answers lined up like suit jackets: reliability, punctuality, a passion for service. He could hear them dying in his throat. "I need a chance," he said instead. "My plant shuttered. My marriage ended. I lost more than I thought I could. But I know how to work. I know how to keep people safe. I'm not afraid of long hours or hard days." He swallowed. "And I won't disappoint you." Silence, but not the punishing kind, more like a quiet room that invites truth to sit a little longer. "I prefer candor to choreography," she said finally. "Most people audition." "You answered. A stop sign." He rolled to a perfect halt, counted 1 2, looked left right left, and continued. "Pull into the next turnout," she said. A gravel lay-by opened between sea grass. He nosed the Bentley in and placed it exactly parallel to the edge, then set it in park. She stepped out. He waited, hands flat on his thighs, until she said, "Walk with me." They stood 30 feet from the car while gulls wrote loose cursive across the sky. "This job is more than steering a wheel," Ariel said, eyes on the line where water met sky. "It's timing, discretion, judgment. You will see me at my best and sometimes at my worst. You will be invisible in a room full of eyes. You will not speak unless asked. You will anticipate. You will adapt. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am." "You will also say no when my safety requires it, even to me." He caught her gaze. "I can do that." A small nod. "Good. Take us home." Back in the drive, she didn't make him sweat. She leaned in at his window, the ocean wind lifting a strand of hair from her cheek. "You'll start Monday," she said. 6 a.m. Samuel held the steering wheel to keep his hands from shaking with relief. "Yes, ma'am." She looked at him a beat longer than necessary, as if filing away the sight of him steady. Then she turned and walked toward the house, heels crisp on stone. He sat in the idling quiet, the sea loud in his chest. Purpose was a weight he was grateful to lift. The house manager introduced herself the first morning at 5:45 a.m., tablet in hand, mouth efficient. "Ms. Duarte," she said. "You'll report to me for household logistics, to security for route coordination, to MS. King for everything that outranks both." "Yes, ma'am." "Garage is down the east hall. The fleet is tagged and fueled nightly. Gloves in the console. We bleach the mats weekly, shoes clean before entry." Her eyes flicked to his polished Oxfords, approved. "You'll meet Michael, head of security. Zoe's the personal assistant, she owns the calendar like God owns Sunday. Speak plainly. Don't be late." "Understood." In the garage, Michael, a barrel-chested man with a soft Mississippi drawl and a face that could look friendly or final, walked him through the tech. "GPS is locked to our network," he said, tapping a discrete module near the wheel well. "Dash cam runs encrypted. Panic button on your column here, don't test it unless you want 6 SUVs and a helicopter." A wink took the thread out of the sentence, not the truth. "Radio codes on this card, keep it in your pocket. Check-in calls at each arrival, no exceptions." "Questions? Routes?" Samuel asked. "I like to know 3 alternates to everywhere." Michael's mouth tugged. "I like you already." They did a garage drill at 6:10, tight turns around pylons, a backward serpentine between columns, a test of mirrors and patience. Samuel threaded the escalade like a needle, never touching a cone. When Michael said, "Emergency stop," Samuel planted the brakes with a pressure that pinned without punishing. "Good hands," Michael said. "You a church drummer?" "Construction," Samuel said. "Same rhythm. Less music." At 6:30, Zoe breezed in like a well-aimed gust, coffee in a lidded cup, phone and stylus moving in a duet. "Good morning, Samuel." "Welcome to the circus," she chirped, and handed him a printed day sheet. Ms. King to Midtown at 8 for a board breakfast, then a 10:30 site visit in Red Hook, noon ribbon cutting in Sunset Park, back east by 4 for a foundation call, black tie gala at 8. We'll change vehicles twice, city prefers the S-Class, gala gets the Phantom. Questions. Which entrance for the Midtown Club, he asked, scanning the sheet. 54th or the service lane on 53rd? Zoe's eyebrows jumped. Service lane. Less photographers. Nice catch. He radioed Michael for a 7:10 roll. At 7:05 he pulled the S-Class to the door, at 7:08 Ms. Duarte nodded from the threshold, at 7:10 exactly Ariel stepped out in a navy sheath and a coat the color of smoke. Morning, she said, sliding into the back. She wore flats for speed, heels boxed on the seat beside her, laptop already waking. Ocean to Expressway to Midtown Tunnel to 2nd, use 53rd service lane. We'll beat school drop-off that way. Already plotted, Samuel said, and saw in the mirror the faintest corner of her mouth lift. The city received them with its usual impatience. He threaded them through it like a man drawing thread through a crowded needle, no sharp moves, no drama, everything smooth enough that Ariel could take 2 calls, rewrite an email, and change into heels without smearing lipstick. In the 53rd Street service lane he eased to the curb exactly where Zoe was already standing with a pass and a smile weaponized for concierges. 8 minutes early, Ariel said as he opened her door. Traffic owed us, he said. She paused, eyes on his, like she was measuring the space between humility and pride. I'll take the interest next time, she said, and disappeared inside. He parked where the doorman told him, texted Zoe the bay number, and sat with the engine off, hands still for the first time that morning. He didn't feel small. He felt precise. By 9:40 they were on the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway, the skyline strung on the right like a bracelet. At the Red Hook yard, a forklift operator in a neon vest waved at Ariel like she was a cousin. She walked the line of trucks with her CFO, asked questions in a language of numbers and asphalt that Samuel understood more than he expected. Axle weight. Turn times. Union schedules. He hadn't realized how hungry he was to be around competence that didn't need to prove itself by breaking someone else. Back in the car at 10:55, Zoe jumped in with a makeup artist and a garment bag the size of a body. Change for noon, she sang. In the rearview, Samuel saw Ariel shed the navy sheath for a white blazer and silk blouse without fuss or apology, the makeup artist dusting light where stress darkened. He moved through city blocks as if they were bars of music, smoothing each transition so the choreography in the backseat could keep tempo. The ribbon cutting ran long because the deputy mayor discovered microphones. At 1:17, Zoe mouthed sorry as they hustled Ariel back to the curb. Expressway is soup, Michael warned on the radio. Take the local to the tunnel. Avoid the construction on 36th. Copy, Samuel said, already there. At 1:49 they hit a knot of traffic that looked like a fist. 2 blocks ahead, a fender bender turned a lane into a parking lot. Samuel checked mirrors, a delivery van crowding his rear bumper, a cyclist slipping between cars, a cab nosing an inch at a time like a stubborn goat. Options? Ariel asked, voice still calm but with that edge of a person who keeps 12 calendars in her head. Alley on your right, lot exit ahead on the left, Samuel said. If the lot gate is high enough, I can go through and pop out on 39th. You sure? Zoe asked from the back, already typing running 8 late to somebody important. I'll make it polite, he said. He flicked the turn signal and persuaded the S-Class between a dumpster and a stubborn Corolla, wheels kissing the curb without scraping. The lot gate rose like a blessing. He waved a thank you to a guard, rolled across the painted floor, and exited into air that moved. 3 turns later they were gliding down Lexington like nothing had happened. At 2:02, he stopped in a shadowed spot beneath an awning. Ariel stepped out, blouse unwrinkled, mouth composed. She turned back, hand on the roof, and for the first time that day let gratitude soften her face. Good call, she said. You drive like you study the city at night. I do, he said, and then, because honesty had served him once already, added, I had to learn new maps. For a beat, something unspoken moved between them, recognition, maybe, of the work a person does in the dark so the daylight has somewhere to stand. The afternoon was quieter, back east by 4, calls and a quick meal, a 30-minute window where he parked beneath a wind-stunted tree and watched the ocean pretend it had no memory. He took out his phone and almost texted Mark a photo of the hood ornament and the line of sea. He didn't. Some things you held like heat in your hands. At 6:30 he switched to the Phantom for the gala. Ms. Duarte checked a seam that no one would see. Michael reviewed the arrivals list through his earpiece. Press at the west entrance, private cars around back. Couple of names we like to keep distance from, Richard Hamilton on the board tonight. The name struck Samuel like a bell. He didn't flinch, but he felt it. Richard. The man with the smile that punished. The husband by upgrade. Clara's new life in cufflinks. He gave the smallest nod. Copy. Ariel came down the stairs in a gown the color of midnight. Diamonds skimmed her collarbones, not ostentatious, just true to light. She moved like a woman who had taught herself how to take up an exact amount of space. Samuel opened the door, she slipped into the back and adjusted her shawl like the night had a dress code. City, she said. Private entrance. On it. In the rear view, she touched her earring and then let her hand fall to her lap. The tiniest clink on the floor mat. Samuel heard it, drivers hear what others don't. At the next red light he put the car in park, glanced back. Pardon me, ma'am. He reached, careful and unhurried, and lifted the diamond stud from the mat with 2 fingers. He set it on the leather between them, eyes averted while she refastened it. Thank you, she said, and there was something like trust braided into the 2 words. They took the service lane again, Michael's voice marking cameras and clusters. Samuel slid the Phantom to the curb at the private door, exactly parallel, exactly unremarkable. He stepped out, opened Ariel's door, and watched her become the kind of woman rooms calibrate themselves around. From his post, he could see the west entrance down a short drive, a glittering chute of flashes. A long black car pulled up there, and a man with the stiff posture of a person used to having gravity favor him stepped out, navy tux, hair perfect, jaw set. Beside him, a woman in silver took his arm. The camera strobes lit her smile into a hard coin. Clara. Samuel did not flinch. He let his breath stay even, hands easy at his sides. Ariel glanced toward the commotion, then toward him, as if checking to see if the world had nudged him off balance. It hadn't. 11:10, Zoe murmured into his radio. Pick up back here. I'll text if it changes. Copy, he said, and closed his door. He waited in the quiet that belongs to chauffeurs and sentries, men who are trusted to be still when the world performs. He watched the entry swallow and release guests in waves. He thought of the man he had been on the bridge, fingers numb on cold iron, and of the man he was now, fingers loose on warm leather, responsible for a person who had built a kingdom and didn't mind saying please. At 9:05, Michael's voice, heads up, small disturbance at the west entrance. Protesters with signs about port emissions. Not aggressive. Just noise. A beat. Hamilton got paint on his shoe. Tragedy for the ages. Samuel smiled to himself, tiny and private. At 10:57, Zoe texted, on our way. Private exit. He eased the Phantom forward half a car length, gave himself a clean angle to leave. The door opened. Ariel slipped into the back, shawl folded like discipline. Home, she said. Home, he echoed, and pulled them into the stream of taillights. They drove in silence for a few blocks, the city throwing its glitter against the windows and letting it slide off. At a red light on Park, Ariel spoke without looking up from the phone she wasn't actually reading. Do you know how rare it is, she said, for a man to protect the person and not the performance? He didn't have an answer that wouldn't tilt toward flattery or toward pain. I've been around drivers who wanted to be seen, she went on. You make yourself a good place to be invisible. He glanced at her in the mirror. I take the shape the job needs. Ariel's mouth curved, not quite a smile. That's useful, she said. It's also dangerous. Don't disappear too far, Mr. Carter. The light changed. He drove. When he pulled beneath the porte-cochere at the house, the ocean sounded like the city breathing in its sleep. Ms. Duarte opened the door from inside before he could ring. Good night, Mr. Carter, she said, and meant it. He waited until Ariel's footsteps softened up the stairs, until Zoe's calendar alarms had been silenced, until Michael's radio crackled its last sign-off. Then he parked the Phantom in its spot, turned the wheels square, and sat in the quiet garage with the engine ticking as it cooled. He thought of the interview turnout where gulls had scribbled overhead and of Ariel saying you will also say no, even to me. He thought of the alley maneuver, of the earring glinting against black leather, of the way her "thank you" had rested in the cabin like a small, real thing. His phone buzzed. A message from Mark. How'd it go? Samuel typed, good. Real good. Then paused, added, feels like a beginning, and hit send. Across the river, in a marble bathroom, Clara scrubbed at a faint smear of red paint on Richard's tuxedo shoe while he lectured the mirror about disrespect. When she straightened, her back ached in a way diamonds don't fix. She opened Instagram, scrolled past a photo someone had posted of the gala staircase, and stopped. In the background, small but there, a familiar profile stood by a black car, posture steady, gaze forward. Her breath caught. She zoomed in until the pixels broke apart. It could be him. It looked like him. Samuel. She closed the app like a door she wasn't ready to open and stared at her reflection until it blinked first. In her suite overlooking the dark Atlantic, Ariel stood at the window and let the ocean's long muscle run through her. She thought of a driver who noticed the quiet things, who didn't try to be the story, who'd said he'd learned new maps. She liked people who rebuilt their compasses. She liked the feeling, unspoken, early, of safety that met her at curbs. On his way back to Queens, Samuel drove his own 4-year-old sedan with its squeak in the driver's seat and felt the road under him like a promise. He didn't pass the bridge. He didn't need to. Dawn would come too soon. There would be more routes to learn, new entrances to memorize, 1,000 tiny decisions no one would see but him. He welcomed all of it. Because beginnings, he'd learned, don't announce themselves with trumpets. They arrive as a set of keys placed in your palm, a schedule in your hand, a voice in your ear saying home, and the knowledge that this time, you know how to get there. And somewhere ahead, on a night where chandeliers would meet old ghosts, the past and present were setting a table, waiting for the moment when all three of their lives would share the same room. The morning sun bounced off the hood of the black Escalade as Samuel guided it smoothly out of the estate's driveway. Ariel sat in the back, laptop open, earbuds tucked neatly in, her eyes darting across spreadsheets like a general surveying battle plans. Samuel kept his attention sharp on the road, but he'd learned to listen beyond the hum of the engine. Days had passed since his first assignment, and though their conversations had been minimal, a rhythm was beginning to form, her clipped instructions, his steady replies, the quiet stretches in between. He liked the order of it, the way every route became muscle memory, every corner anticipated before it arrived. Still, something inside him wondered if he was only a pair of hands on a steering wheel to her. That changed on a Wednesday afternoon. They were headed back from a construction site tour in Newark. Ariel closed her laptop and leaned back, exhaustion etched faintly across her face. For a few minutes she simply stared out at the blur of warehouses and shipping containers rolling past. Then, her gaze shifted to the rearview mirror. "Tell me, Mr. Carter," she said, her tone less formal than usual, "what did you do before this?" Samuel hesitated. No one had asked him that in months. Most people didn't care. To them, he was just the man holding the door, the invisible driver who blended into the background. I worked at a steel plant, he said finally. Started out loading, worked my way up to supervisor. Ran crews, managed safety. 15 years. Ariel sat forward slightly, interest flickering across her face. Supervisor. Yes, ma'am. I had a team of about 12 men. We kept the site running, stayed ahead of deadlines. No major accidents under my watch. Her brows lifted. 15 years of leadership. And no one has scooped you up since. Samuel let out a dry laugh. The plant closed. Jobs dried up. Nobody wanted a middle-aged man with calluses when they could hire a college grad with a polished resume. I lost more than just work. The weight of Clara's departure hung unsaid in the air. Ariel studied him carefully, her sharp eyes softening just enough to betray thoughtfulness. You know logistics. Scheduling. Risk management. Safety compliance. Yes, ma'am. That's half the battle in my world. Samuel gripped the steering wheel tighter, not daring to believe where this was going. The next morning, instead of the usual silent ride, Ariel struck up conversation again. How would you reroute shipments if a major hub was shut down? She asked casually, as if quizzing him. Samuel thought for a moment. Depends on the product. If it's perishables, time is everything. I'd split the load, send half through the fastest alternate port, and reroute the rest by rail if needed. Expensive, but you don't lose the whole batch. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. And if it's steel? He blinked at her. Steel. Yes. My father built half his empire on it. Imagine the docks shut down. Samuel leaned into the thought. Steel's heavy but not perishable. Time matters less than volume. I'd wait out the hub closure unless a client demanded delivery. Then I'd contract smaller carriers, break the shipment into pieces. Less efficient, but it keeps the pipeline moving. Ariel tilted her head, clearly impressed. You think like a manager. I used to be one. You still are, she corrected. That Friday, Ariel attended another gala in Manhattan. The event was crawling with press, donors, and executives whose smiles were as sharp as their cufflinks. Samuel parked the S-Class out front, but stayed close, as trained. Inside the grand hall, Ariel was speaking to a group of investors when one of them, a heavy-set man with flushed cheeks from too much champagne, leaned in too close. His hand grazed her arm, lingering longer than politeness allowed. Samuel noticed from across the room. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, every movement precise, not aggressive but firm. Ms. King, he said smoothly, inclining his head. Your next appointment is waiting. Ariel caught on instantly. She excused herself with a polite smile, slipping free of the man's grip. As they walked away, she glanced at Samuel. Their eyes met, and for the first time, gratitude glimmered openly in hers. Later, in the car, she broke the silence. You handled that well. Just doing my job, Samuel said. No. You did more than that. Her voice dropped. You saw what I needed without me having to say it. Something shifted between them then, the recognition of a man who wasn't just a driver, but a protector, someone who noticed the quiet things others ignored. 2 weeks later, Ariel called him into her study, a room lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and maps of shipping routes pinned across one wall. She sat behind a sleek mahogany desk, fingers steepled. Sit, Samuel, she said. The use of his first name startled him. He obeyed. I've been thinking about what you told me. 15 years running teams. 0 accidents. The way you've handled yourself here, not just behind the wheel, but in every situation. He stayed silent, waiting. She leaned back. You're wasted as just my driver. Samuel's chest tightened. Ma'am. I need someone who understands people and logistics. Someone I can trust with more than traffic routes. I want you in my company. Operations manager. Oversee drivers, safety protocols, scheduling. It's not glamorous, but it's important. And it pays far better than chauffeuring. For a moment, Samuel couldn't breathe. He had imagined second chances before, but never like this. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Ariel said simply. He swallowed hard. Yes. Absolutely. Thank you, Miss King. Good. She allowed herself a small smile. Then let's begin. The following week, Samuel traded the driver's cap for an office badge. He still drove Ariel occasionally. She insisted she trusted him more than anyone else, but now his days were filled with schedules, spreadsheets, and people looking to him for guidance. He walked the yards, shook hands with mechanics, asked drivers about their routes. Word spread quickly that the new manager wasn't some outsider in a suit, he was one of them. And Ariel watched it all with quiet satisfaction. She had gambled on a broken man, and in return she saw a leader reborn. One evening, as Samuel left her office, she called after him. Samuel. He turned. You were right about steel shipments, she said with a faint grin. You think like an operator. Don't ever doubt that again. For the first time in years, Samuel smiled without bitterness. Across town, Clara scrolled through Instagram from the edge of her king-sized bed. Her husband, Richard, was in his study yelling at someone over the phone. She paused on a news article. King Lines promotes new operations manager, former plant supervisor Samuel Carter. Her hand trembled as she zoomed in on the photo. It was him. Samuel. Standing tall in a tailored suit, confidence returned to his frame. The headline praised his leadership and the promise he brought to the company. Clara's chest tightened. The man she'd abandoned in a tiny apartment now belonged to a world she could only watch from behind glass. And for the first time, regret seeped into her bones. The winter wind swept through Manhattan like it was carrying secrets. Samuel sat behind his new desk on the 12th floor of King Line's headquarters, the skyline sprawling outside the wide windows. He still wasn't used to the view, glass towers glinting in the pale sunlight, the harbor dotted with ships bearing the King logo. He wore a tailored navy suit now, his tie neat, shoes polished, posture straight. Sometimes he thought back to the recliner in his old apartment, the one that sagged under the weight of defeat. He thought of nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if life had quietly closed its doors on him. Now, he was here. Not just surviving, building again. And he wasn't alone. Ariel had become more than a boss. She had become a confidant, a partner in quiet conversations that stretched beyond work. Late nights spent in her office, talking not only about logistics and contracts but about resilience, loss, and the hunger to build something that lasts. There was an ease between them now, respect that grew roots, affection that began to bloom where neither had expected. Samuel's phone buzzed on the desk. An email from Zoe, Ariel's assistant, gala tomorrow night. Ms. King requests your presence, not as staff, but as her guest. He leaned back in his chair, the words hitting him like a sunrise. Guest. At her side, not behind the wheel. He smiled quietly. Across town, in an uptown penthouse, Clara Hamilton scrolled through her phone with shaking hands. Her eyes lingered on the photo from the Business Journal, Samuel Carter, new operations manager of King Lines, standing beside Ariel King herself. His suit fit him perfectly, his shoulders squared with confidence she hadn't seen in years. He looked happy. Meanwhile, Clara's life had turned into a slow-motion nightmare. The bruises Richard left weren't always visible, but they were there, under her ribs, in her silences, in the way she flinched when he raised his voice. The money, the diamonds, the lavish parties, none of it shielded her from the reality that she had walked out of one life into a gilded prison. And now, seeing Samuel's face on her screen, the full weight of regret pressed down on her. She had left him when he was broken, only to watch him rebuild into a man stronger than before. A man loved and respected by a woman of power. Tears pricked her eyes as she whispered to the empty room, "What did I do?" 2 days later, Samuel was walking out of the King Line's building when he heard his name. "Samuel." The voice froze him mid-step. He turned, and there she was, Clara. Wrapped in a designer coat, her makeup perfect, but her eyes swollen and desperate. She looked smaller somehow, like the confidence she once carried had been stolen from her. "Clara," he said, his voice calm but guarded. She rushed forward, ignoring the curious glances of people passing on the sidewalk. "I had to see you. I had to explain." "There's nothing to explain," Samuel interrupted gently. Her voice cracked. "Please, just listen. I made a mistake. I thought leaving you would fix everything, but Richard, he's not the man I thought. He's cruel, Samuel. I don't feel safe with him. I don't feel loved. And then I saw you," her breath hitched. "You've become everything I ever wanted. I was wrong. I should never have left." Samuel studied her, the pain in her eyes unmistakable. But the part of him that once longed for her, that once would have dropped everything at her feet, was gone. In its place stood a man who had found peace in the ashes. "Clara," he said softly, "you didn't just leave me. You gave up on me. On us. When life got hard, you chose someone else." She shook her head violently, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I was scared. I was tired of struggling. I thought money would solve everything, but it didn't. It broke me. I just want us back." Samuel's heart ached, but not for the reason she hoped. He pitied her, but he no longer loved her. That part of his heart had been closed, sealed, and given to someone else. As if the universe had timed it, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Ariel stepped out, radiant in a fitted coat, her presence commanding as always. She spotted Samuel, then Clara, her sharp eyes piecing the scene together instantly. "Everything all right here?" Ariel asked, her tone calm but protective. Clara's gaze flicked between them, realization dawning. She saw the way Ariel looked at Samuel, not as an employee, but as something more. She saw the way Samuel straightened, not in fear, but in quiet respect for the woman beside him. "Who is she?" Clara whispered. Samuel didn't hesitate. "She's the woman who believed in me when no one else did." Clara's breath caught, the final crack splintering her chest. She took a step back, her voice breaking. "So, that's it? You won't even give me another chance?" Samuel shook his head slowly. "You walked out when I had nothing. She walked in and saw me as someone worth building with. That's the difference, Clara." For a long moment, silence hung heavy between them. Clara wiped her cheeks, turned away, and melted into the crowd of strangers on the sidewalk, just another face swallowed by the city. Ariel's gaze lingered on Clara's retreating figure before she turned back to Samuel. "Do you need a moment?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "No. That chapter ended a long time ago." She studied him for a second, then offered the faintest smile. "Good. Because we have another gala tonight, and I'd rather not face it alone." Samuel's lips curved upward. "Then you won't." Later that evening, they stood side by side at the gala, not as driver and employer, but as partners. The crowd whispered, cameras flashed, but Samuel didn't notice any of it. He only noticed Ariel, her steady presence beside him, her hand brushing his briefly as if to remind him he belonged there. As the music swelled and the chandelier light glittered above, Samuel felt something he hadn't in years: peace. Not the fragile kind that breaks when the wind changes, but the strong, rooted kind that grows when two people choose each other in both storm and sunshine. Clara would go on living in her glass prison, haunted by the man she abandoned. But Samuel's story had already turned the page. He had fallen, been broken, and rebuilt into someone stronger, not because of wealth, not because of luck, but because he had been given the gift of belief. And in Ariel's eyes, he saw not just love, but a future worth fighting for. For once, Samuel no longer wondered why Clara left. He understood. She wasn't meant to stay. Because sometimes, the greatest blessing is when the wrong person walks out of your life, so the right one can walk in. Life has a way of showing us who truly belongs. Samuel lost everything, but in that loss, he found a new beginning. And a love that never left when times got hard. Tell me, would you forgive someone who abandoned you when you were at your lowest? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, I'd love to hear from you. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because more powerful stories like this are coming your way. Until next time, keep believing in second chances.